Here with Bianca Smith, Boston Red Sox coach, Dartmouth grad, coached at Dallas, Carroll University. I just saw this, thank goodness for Wikipedia, law degree and then MBA from Case Western, and then worked with the program there as well. Spent time with the Rangers, the Reds, and MLB too. You're in the office for a little bit with MLB, so thanks for jumping on with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, you know, was Dartmouth your only option with your parents graduating from there? I mean, were you allowed to even look at other schools?
So, surprisingly enough, I was. My dad was very much go wherever you want. I don't really care. Of course, he was very happy I went to Dartmouth, but he was like, go where you're interested. My mom actually wanted me to go to Princeton. But that's because despite what my Wikipedia page says, I'm not from Pennsylvania. I was born in New Jersey. That's where my mom was born. My grandmother was born. So, very proud of that. But of course, when I got into Dartmouth as well, my mom was super excited, was up there every term that I was there. Actually, she might have been there more than I was. Um, but yeah, I learned from my mistakes. Dartmouth was the only school I applied to. I applied early decision. I didn't even have any backup applications ready. My mom once asked me, "What's your backup school?" And I just went, "Oh, Yale." And my mom's like, "That's not a backup school. Like, you need something else." And I learned from that for grad school. I at least applied to more than one school, but I realize now how incredibly lucky I was that I got in because I was not ready to apply to any other school.
Yeah, the Ivy League process is stressful. You know, you talk to the coaches that coach in that league, and then the people that go there. The process is stressful for admissions.
Yeah, like I said, I definitely lucked out. Applying early decision certainly helped, but I didn't find out until middle of December. And when you have the Common App due January 1st, and I have not filled it out yet, I don't know what I would have been doing if I hadn't gotten in. And I definitely didn't realize until way too late that that was not the right. I should have at least been ready for like with an actual backup school. I also realize now Yale is not a backup school. I'm sorry to anybody who went to Yale.
Hey, how did playing softball and then with the club team come about?
Yeah, so that's always an interesting story. I did play in high school, but I broke my thumb my senior year, and it was the first game of the season. I actually made it worse because my dad thought I had jammed it. So I'm here sitting in the dugout, like pulling on it, and made the break worse. So I only played in the field for one game, and I'd only been playing for a few years. So I convinced myself I wasn't good enough to play in college. So I got to Dartmouth, and of course, I picked the school not for softball, but got to the school and ended up cheering instead, just so I had something to do. I started working for the baseball team, and I went into the athletic department to talk to the baseball coach and ran into the new softball coach at the time and thought she was a student. And we just started talking. And I told her, yeah, I played in high school, didn't get to, I didn't get on varsity until my senior year because my coach knew I wanted to play. So he kept me on JV so I could start rather than ride the bench. Um, and I told her I was a pinch runner my senior year. And she said, well, we're looking for speed. Do you want to try out? And I wasn't going to say no to trying out for a D1 program, especially at Dartmouth. So it's like, yeah, I'll try out for the team. I tried out sometime in January. I made it. My coach said I had raw talent. So she was willing to, you know, take the chance with me. And then 2 months later, the club baseball team started up. And I had always wanted to play baseball. So I secretly joined the club baseball team. My coach knew I was still cheering. We had an agreement. I wasn't allowed to cheer or stunt during the preseason. So as soon as preseason hit, I was only allowed to cheer on the sidelines. I could stunt during the fall and the beginning of basketball season. But somehow my practices never conflicted. Somehow the games never conflicted. And this is cheer, softball, and baseball. I think maybe once I missed either cheer practice or something for softball practice. But baseball always practiced after softball because we all use the same facilities. So, as the softball team's leaving, the coaches are leaving. I'm here taking my time, putting my stuff in my bag, acting like I'm about to leave. Club baseball team comes in and I take my baseball gear out. I basically told them, don't hit me during BP. And I'm not doing any infield work because if I get hurt, my coach is going to be pissed. She has no idea I'm doing this. And she found out the year after. So it was a delicate balancing act. Um, But I'm really glad I did it because I was mainly a pinch runner my junior year because that's when I walked onto the softball team. And then I actually got hurt my senior year. We have very bad luck in our family getting hurt senior years. So I didn't actually get to play in the field. I was on the bench acting more as a manager. So I actually played more innings in my on the club baseball team than I did softball.
Any options for you up to that point, baseball wise? Youth baseball, no high school, correct?
No, and I actually only joined the high school softball team because I got cut from the soccer team. I played soccer for nearly 10 years. That was and it wasn't really me at the time. Like you do what your parents put you in. So it never even occurred to me to ask my parents, hey, can I play t-ball or actually I didn't even know what softball was until high school. I knew what baseball was, obviously. I'd grown up watching the sport, but it never occurred to me that I could play. Never occurred to me to ask my parents, can I try? So my parents put me in soccer. And then my mom told me I wasn't good enough to make my high school soccer team. She was right. And told me, play softball as your backup sport. And thankfully, the softball team in high school didn't make cuts because I definitely would have been cut. I didn't even know how to throw because I've been coming from soccer. I'd only played softball for about 3 or 4 months before I joined my high school softball team. And it kind of makes me upset because if I improved that much in 4 years, like imagine what would happen if I'd actually started earlier.
Yep. Who got you into coaching?
Um, I wouldn't say it was really a specific person. I really just kind of fell into it. I decided to work in baseball my sophomore year of college. I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. That didn't work out. And it kind of just hit me. I mean, I loved working in this athletic atmosphere. And it wasn't just as a player. And I realized somebody's got to be doing this behind the scenes. So I didn't see a woman coaching. So it was kind of, you see it, you can be it mentality at the time. But I'd seen, assistant general managers. So I knew I wanted to be on the baseball ops side. I wanted to have something to do with the roster. I wanted to impact, what's on the field. And I should have known then that was more coaching than being in an office. But it wasn't until I got to Case Western where I actually got to be in the dugout working on the field that I realized how much I actually liked being in the trenches. But I didn't admit that to myself until later because I had so many expectations of being in the front office that I kind of pushed it aside until I finally realized like other people can tell I was not happy being in the office. Yeah, it wasn't really a person. It was more just I found that I loved working with athletes and being on the field way more than being in an office.
And is that going to maybe not seeing a female coach at that point? Because what you said, like I think you have to see it to know there's an opportunity for it, and not seeing it. And now we're in a great place with baseball because we have so many people to look to now that are doing it, where it does give women an absolute a chance to see that, like, hey, somebody is doing it now.
I think it definitely had part of it. It was less for me. Not, it wasn't because I didn't see it that I didn't think I could do it. It just never occurred to me that it was a possibility. Because by the time I decided I wanted to be a full-time coach, there still weren't women coaching. So I still decided, I mean, I like this better. It was more just, I never really thought about it as a career path. Um, I'm not really sure because I don't think I've ever really had the mentality if I can't see it, I can't do it. In my family, that's just not a thing. In our family, it's whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. I got family members who have made history way before I did. So that's just how we are. But I think it did have a little bit to do with it. Kind of like with me not asking to play baseball. Like it just never occurred to me that that was a thing.
Talk about in your family, like who broke some barriers.
Oh well, my stepmom's dad was the second African American to get a PhD in meteorology. Also has a Nobel Prize. Um, like leading researcher in climate change. Was an advisor to every president. I think from like Reagan to Obama, maybe right before that. Obviously, I got a brother who's a professional soccer player. I got another cousin who's a model and an opera singer. Another one who's like a violin prodigy. So, I mean, my stepmom is one of the few female. I mean, actually, I think it's growing now, but at least when she started, she was one of the few female urologists in the country. Um, and it might not be breaking barriers, but I mean, my mom didn't go to law school until I was already in high school. So this is just how our family is. I explain to people, if you know our family, then I'm one of the normal ones. Like this is no surprise to people what I've done.
Hey, your time with Major League Baseball, did that also kind of show you that you didn't want to be in the front office or go that route as much?
Yeah, that was probably the big turning point. I mean, the my job with the Rangers, I think since it was closer, like it was actually with the team, I thought I could still do it. But once I was in the commissioner's office, the 9 to 5, which people are surprised, at least as an intern, we were actually doing 9 to 5. If I was still in the office at 5:15, I got kicked out. And that was weird to me. But I miss being with the team. I miss the competitive atmosphere. But it was also I applied for the MLB Diversity Fellowship Program, and I actually got pretty far. I think like the final round with 2 teams, and the feedback was I didn't look like I really wanted that job. Like I wasn't excited about it, and like yeah, you can't really fake passion, and that's really when it hit me. And like yeah, I can't do this. I can't be in an office. I got to be on the field again.
What do you think the biggest differences are now, coaching wise, when you first started?
I think coaches are more open to doing things that they didn't do when they played. Because I mean, I think I had great coaches growing up, but I've definitely heard and seen coaches who've said, well, this is the way I did it. This is how we're going to do it. And that's now, I mean, it's still a thing for a lot of coaches, but I think more coaches are now realizing that just because you did it one way doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way. So I think, yeah, the biggest thing has been coaches are just way more open minded and willing
I
to
think
also
it's
have a
the quickest
conversation.
way out now. Like you're going to be out pretty quick if that's your go-to, that this is the way I've always done it or we've always done it. You're not going to be in our profession for very long anymore. Like it used to
No,
be the way that you did it, but now you're not going to be in our profession for very long.
no, I mean, you have to be open minded. And part of that is also being willing to actually have a conversation with your players and let them question you. I mean, I encourage my players to question me all the time. If there's a drill they don't understand what we're doing, ask. And if I can't give them a good reason, then either we shouldn't be doing that drill or I need to learn more. It's nothing on them. Like I want them to ask, I want them to experiment. And I've noticed that even with players, like even now, a lot of players are uncomfortable with that because they're not used to it.
For sure.
They're so used to coaches just telling them, hey, we're just going to do it this way and don't ask me about it. So it's taken me like right now, I'm actually back at Carroll for another week, helping them out. And I remember last year working with the player who I gave him a drill. The next day, he just had this look on his face where he's just frowning. I was like, all right, what's wrong? He said, well, this drill doesn't really work for me. And I kind of had another drill I wanted to try. So I said, all right, what's the drill? And he just goes, no, 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 it's okay. I'll just do your drill. And it took me a full 10 minutes to finally get him to tell me what the drill was.
Hey, what drill? Which drill
I
did he
think
was he not adjusting to?
um I think it might have been the shoot, what was it? The walk-ups. Which I know like I think we only have like 2 guys here at Carroll who actually like that drill and think it helps them. And he was trying to do something else. I don't even remember what the drill was that he came up with, but I just remember him saying, yeah, this feels better. And I'm just watching saying, well, all right, if it feels better, let's try it. Let's see if it works. And I just remember him going, oh, right, you're that coach who actually encourages creativity. Like, yes. Like it's your career, it's your body. You know it better than I do. So yeah, that's been a big difference. I think players are getting used to as well.
Was there much of an adjustment going from Carroll to then with the Red Sox? I mean, was there much of an adjustment for you?
Biggest adjustment was I don't actually have to coach mechanics as much as I do at Carroll. And I've even noticed that with like here, the freshmen and some of the sophomores are usually the ones where we have to do more mechanically based drills. Whereas once you get to junior, senior, and I have to remind these guys too, because I had a guy yesterday who he's hitting off the machine. And right before he walks in, he goes, hey, coach, can you watch my swing? And I'm just sitting here going, one, you're a senior. Second of all, if I'm not saying anything, it's not because you're doing something bad. It's because you're not doing anything bad. Like stop mechanically, you're actually pretty sound. Now it's, everything else. It's timing, it's approach, it's pitch recognition. And me telling you that is not like every pitch is not going to help.
Yep.
So that's they're at least at the rookie level, they're more like the juniors and seniors where mechanically there might be 1 or 2 tweaks we have to make. But after that, it's going to be the mental side and getting them ready for a professional season. So that was the biggest adjustment for me.
And that's a barrier of entry. They all look a certain way, and that's a scouting department's job is they're going to weed a lot of that out. For right or wrong, they're going to weed a lot of that out before they get to the pro side. So as a pro coach, you're not going to have to deal with as much of that as you are at the college side where it's more development based,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the pro side where it's rep based. You talked about timing. I mean, do you have any go-tos for timing to help? I think that every coach runs into timing issues with your players. They go up levels. Do you have any go-tos that you like?
Man, the number of times I've talked to coaches and I kind of ask them the same thing. And yeah, it's like that's the hardest thing to coach. Um, One, I mean, it's hard because we do so much machine work, and I know that's hard for guys to get the timing out. And I try to tell them, I mean, if you're putting your foot down as the ball's coming out of the machine, you're probably too late because that's the ball being released. And we just had this conversation yesterday where I found out a lot of guys, for them, their timing is, oh, I get my foot down when the ball's being released. And I said, you realize it's like less than 2 seconds. If you got a really good pitcher, you got like a second and a half. And I know it seems like really minuscule, but that's even too late. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, because this is a minute or second and a half from the time they start their motion. So by the time they release it, you have a split second to get your foot down and swing. So really, you should be thinking as they put their foot down, because at that point, their arm technically, like once you slow it down, their arm is still behind them, and you have another split second to actually make the decision whether you're going to swing or not. And like, I'd rather you be too early than too late, because if we're coaching you properly, you should be able to keep your hands back, keep that load, keep that coil and that momentum, and still be able to explode and swing, rather than you're putting your foot down and swinging at the same time, because then you're going to be out in front. And I think a lot of guys are thinking, oh, I'm putting my foot down and I should be swinging as I put my foot down. I'm like, no, that's when you slow it down, that's actually not what you should be doing. So we actually worked on this yesterday in live, where we told our guys, you are literally mimicking the pitcher. You're loading the same time they start their motion. You're putting your foot down the same time they put their foot down. And realistically, you're probably going to be a little off because of how fast it is. But if that's your mentality versus when they release the ball, you're going to get your foot down just a little bit earlier, and you're going to have more time to actually see the ball. So at least from yesterday, apparently our timing was a lot better than it was in the past. And then we told them, if you find that you're doing it too early, because every guy, their bat speed is going to be different too. So this is probably going to be more helpful for guys with, lower bat speed. But if you got a higher bat speed, then you can adjust from there. But I'd rather you adjust from being too early than adjust from being too late.
Especially early in the season. I mean, they're just now getting back into it, and if they don't start early enough this time of the year, they're going to start the year late off live pitching. You have to go earlier in the beginning of the year, and once they get into a groove, then the timing smooths out. But you saw it all the time with guys is they thought they were on time and they're late, and once they started to buy into going just a little bit earlier than what they were used to, it usually cleaned up in live action. But if you don't start early enough this time of year, you're going to be looking at a tough start to the year once you start to see live pitching consistently.
Yeah, and that was at least here at Carroll, that was our biggest thing. We actually started live. We just started at the beginning of the third week of practice, and we've actually been going live since the first week. And we've been struggling with timing. And I didn't even think about this until last week. I was working with one player who said the same thing, that, yeah, I wait until the ball is released. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, that's, for me, I think of it almost as, it's almost like base running in softball, where you're not allowed to leave until the ball is released. But everybody knows a good base runner, you're not leaving as the ball's released. You're leaving right before as the arm is still behind. Yeah. So you still get that minuscule, like that split second extra timing. And it makes such a difference. So we'll see if this continues to help. But I'm trying to get them same idea off the machine. Because again, I know how hard it is to time the machine up. If the ball coming out of the machine is the release, then you need to be getting your foot down right before the ball is coming out. And just trying to get that as well. So that's the best advice I can give our guys with timing. It's hard. But I think probably getting your foot down the same time the pitcher's getting their foot down is going to help with consistency too, just because every pitcher is different.
Yep. Hey, what were some things that you really liked when you first got into it with the Red Sox? I mean, what were some things? It could be organization drills. What were some things that you saw that maybe you haven't been doing up to that point that you really liked?
No really specific drills. It's more just mentality and philosophy. One thing that, and I've kind of started introducing it here, is not giving them so many drills in such a short amount of time. So this is more. I notice this more on the defensive side, but even hitting, we do it this way too. You've got one, maybe two focuses for that drill. Like we don't care what happens with the rest. We'll put it together later when we're actually on the field. But when you're drill oriented, you're only working on one or two things. So defensively, it might be your glove work. Or if we're working footwork and you miss the ball, fine. Let's get your footwork down first, then we'll start to put it together. And there's always some kind of progression, whether it's hitting, whether it's fielding. You start with one thing, you do the next thing, and then you gradually move up to the point where you're putting everything together. But we got to break it down first so you understand exactly like every single piece.
Where's the
And
first place they're starting with defense? Where's the first place in the progression?
glove work. Yeah. So I mean, like our early work routine for outfield is they don't even have a glove. It's just bare hand. And they're just doing soft short hops to each other, and they'll do like just tap back, focusing on glove presentation, but just with their hand. And I introduced that here at Carroll, and the guys love it. They're like, yeah, we love the idea of, I mean, if you can present your glove without the actual glove, it gets a little bit easier because now you know like where your hand should be, not just where your glove should be. And then you progress to footwork after you've done the glove work and you put that all together. But yeah, that's the first thing we do. And I think that's the one we do the most. Like our early work routine, we do 3 or 4 times a week with the 6 days that we have. Um,
What about with hitting? Where's the first place they start?
that one's harder because it depends on the player. Yeah, it depends on what their issue is. I mean, with fielding, it's in that situation, unless you get some guy with really funky mechanics, that's going to look more the same with everybody than hitting's going to be. So I try to think like with hitting, it just depends on what part of the swing they're struggling with. But I always go from the beginning to the end of their swing. So looking at first, just the load. Are they loading properly? Is their back knee going over their foot, or are they loading on the inside of their foot? So focus on that first. If they're not doing that, all right, let's get that first. So it's still the same thing. It's a progression. It's going from the very beginning to the end. I mean, if you got a guy who can't like load properly, why are you going to focus on his bat path first? Like get there eventually, but let's get that part down first. So at least they have that power. So then if you miss hit, great, you still had a hard hit. Versus now you have no power because you've been focusing on bat path so much. Okay, great. You might get, a weak single. But like I want to get you to that point where I'd rather you almost have that miss hit and then work on bat path after. But get that beginning of that swing down first, because that also helped with timing.
Yeah, the lower
So
half takes care of a lot of it. And, and that's the progression of hitting where you used to never talk about load that much, maybe with hands, and now everybody talks about it, which is great, but the byproduct of that is too much weight getting on the backside, so their back knee breaks, and they have too much weight back there, and now they're not athletic anymore, and they've lost an athletic movement because they have too much weight sitting on their back.
So that's actually one of the things that I didn't learn until I got to the Sox was the idea of telling guys weight on the inside part of their foot. Yeah. And I'm like, that's so true, because even if you end up putting too much weight, everything is still going to be more in front than too far back. You're not going to be as stuck on your backside. And then just trying to give them that cue when they actually stride. I mean, I've told guys, think of it as a sumo landing, or you're sitting instead of stepping into your stride. Or now you're also putting the weight on the inside front or inside part of your front foot. Or for some guys, it's as simple as, what is your athletic position when you field? That's the same position you should be when you're hitting. That is your strongest point. So there are different ways to say it. But once you get to that point, that's when guys start to realize, okay, I'm too out in front. I've even had some guys who they can't necessarily feel it. So I'll tell them, get into your stride and then see if you could pick up either foot. Like if you're too far out in front, you could pick up your back foot and balance. If you're too far back, you could pick up your front foot. But if you're truly balanced, you can't pick up either without falling. And that'll actually give you an idea, even if you can't feel the weight, because I have come across one or two guys where they really can't feel it and we have to find a different way. one of them I'm working with, we have a freshman who keeps like he was telling me I can't feel coil. I can't feel load at all. So I said, all right, let's get in the cage. And we actually started using the blast sensors. And instead we focused on actually body placement and body awareness. And for some, we had him coil a little bit more. We had him get into his back hip a little bit more and see how his power was affected, see how his rotation was affected. And once that went up, we said, okay, let's try this more. So instead of telling him, yeah, coil, now I'm telling him, get into your back hip a little bit more. And he knows exactly what I mean. But
Yeah, the
that,
gamification piece is huge for this generation. They understand that. The sensors are good. Any sort of instant feedback they can get with that. I feel like this generation is much easier for them to make adjustments because it's something they're used to. They've all played games. They've heard dings. I just think coaches that aren't using it, you better get on board because this is the players that you're dealing with now. Is they
yeah,
understand the gamification piece.
yeah, or at least just know some of it. Because I mean, I still have guys who they don't care.
Yep.
They'll do the sensors so that we have the numbers, and then they just want us to tell them the drills to help them. And then other guys are asking me, oh, what does this number mean? What number do I need to get to? Like, what is the measurement? And I'm like, yeah, I really got to know my stuff because I can't just be like, oh, well, no, you don't need to know that. Like, I don't care if they know it as long as they understand it.
Are they using it off live yet, or is it just with drills?
Last year we were using it live, but I was also here for most of the year. So, like I said, I got here the day before they first started. Um, Staffing was a little limited to get to go live, and it was hard trying to shift between two different sensors because there's no time really to do in between. So hopefully we'll get to live because that's what I prefer doing blast off of
Yes.
because that's your actual game swing. I mean, we did exit velo last week, and I was making fun of some of the players because I could tell they were doing an exit velo swing,
Yep.
and they were not barreling balls. And they're like, "Why am I struggling?" I'm like, "Well, is that your game swing or your exit velo swing?" So eventually, I'm hoping they'll get to live, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because that's where you see the breakdown. 5 o'clock hitters are there for a reason. It's way more comfortable in batting practice for them, and that's where it's eye opening when you see the differences in some of the metrics, both in a comfortable setting and then when they have to start to make swing decisions. It's a way different deal. Way
So
different
yeah.
deal. What about mentality? I mean, you talked about mentality. I mean, what are some things that you guys are doing mentality wise that you like?
Um, I mean, with the Sox, it's more just talking with guys. Like, obviously, we have our mental skills coordinators. If we ever have any issues, we could kind of give them a heads up. Hey, this guy might be struggling with something. And once we get to know them, it's really just building up that trust and being able to tell when guys are struggling, not just performance wise, but when it's not a mechanical issue. So, I mean, we have our two official hitting coaches. Last year, we had our two fourth coaches, which I was one of, and all four of us worked with hitters. So we kind of had like our six or seven we saw every morning. So we really got to get to know them. And after a while, I mean, those six or seven, I could tell just when they come into the cage whether they're having a good day or not already. And I kind of made it an unwritten rule. I'm not really sure how this became a thing, but when guys come to my cage, like they knew before they had their first round, they had to give me either a high five or a fist bump, and I'm going to ask you how you're doing. And I'm not just asking physically; I'm also asking mentally. And the first couple weeks, if guys give me your standard answer, yeah, I'm doing good. Great day. After a while, guys started to become more honest. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it today. And then it's all right. Is it physical? Is it mental? Like what's going on? And then just kind of talking them through it. Um,
Is part of that their routine? I mean, obviously routines, but the minor league schedule, it is lengthy. Is that part of it for them? They feel run down mentally. They feel run down physically. Is it other things? Is it off the field stuff? Is it a mix of things?
it's a mix. Some guys do have off the field stuff that we might not know about. And again, until you build that trust up, they don't really tell us. It's not like they come in and just go, hey, I'm having this issue. Like guys just don't do that. Um, And then depending on what part of the season we're in, it might be physical. Usually that's not towards until the very end. Then guys start to feel it. Maybe at the very beginning, if they haven't been conditioning, they might feel it. And then mental, that it's a roller coaster, especially at the rookie level, because we've got extended, which last year was cut by a month because we started late. So this year is going to be very interesting. But when you're playing 24 games, and that's just 6 weeks where the stats don't count besides just to see development wise. And you're playing the same team over and over and over again. And you get to just roll innings. And like after a while, you're like, okay, what's the point? Like, why am I still here? And especially for guys who think that they need to be at another level, they shouldn't be here. Mentally, it starts to get draining. So it's just kind of keeping them not only engaged, but just encouraging them. And
What are
like,
some tips for late in the season? I think all coaches run through it at the end of the year. What are some tips to help them re-engage with the process?
well, sometimes, at least like drill wise, I'll actually give them a drill during practice that's has not really nothing to do with baseball, but doesn't involve an actual baseball. So one of my favorite drills I love to give outfield, and we do this once, maybe twice a month, is we're working on communication, but they're juggling a soccer ball. So now they get to be athletic, but you have your center fielders. So our normal center fielders are the center fielders in the circle. They can call off anybody. So now they actually have to pay attention. They have to communicate, but it's also a competition. So if they're trying not to let the ball drop, if it gets to one guy and he can't either pass it or he misses it, he's out. And it's hilarious because you also see the guys who might have actually played a little bit of soccer.
Yes, I was going
But
to ask you that. Like, how
yeah,
many guys do you have that have never touched a soccer ball before that are going to have a hard time just juggling?
it's definitely been interesting. We got a couple of guys who they haven't quite figured out not to put so much power into their kick or to like angle their foot a little bit more so they're not just kicking it at it anywhere. And then you get some guys who, I mean, they start heading the ball, they start using their chest, and like it's just like soccer, just don't use your hands, but call for the ball, talk. And since it becomes a competition, they get really into it. I actually have some videos of the guys juggling the soccer balls back and forth, and they love it. And like I said, you're still working on communication. You still get to let them be athletic, but it's just something different that it's not your typical drill that you're just going through the motions. Like it's just it's something to kind of get their mind off of everything else. So that's one thing we like to do. And then it's kind of like on camp days where we might just do an inter squad scrimmage and we have time. I mean, we kind of had to wait to do this last season because of COVID with our restrictions. But once those came down, we were able to kind of like just give guys suggestions on things to do. Like just get out of the hotel, just come up with something where you're not thinking about baseball.
Getting outside is a big one. Most people don't do it. Just get outside, even if it's for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Blink into the sun for a little bit. There's just so many benefits to it, and everybody gets stuck inside.
And then sometimes it's also just a reminder. I mean, especially, once we get the drafted guys, it's just like, having freshmen come in and they're used to being the best of the best. And now they're also facing the other best of the best, and they're no longer the big fish in the sea. And they start to get down on themselves because they're like, oh, great, now I'm failing. I don't belong here. It's reminding them, one, you wouldn't be here if we didn't think you could, if you, yeah, you could succeed. Like we wouldn't put you in that position. This is what you're here because you have the skill. Now we just need to, fine tune it. Or I had this conversation with our hitters yesterday about developing a routine. Most guys have a routine when they're doing well, but do you have a routine when you're struggling to? And my favorite example is telling guys, I mean, you hit 3 out of 10 and you're considered an all-star. But the ones who separate themselves aren't the ones who focus on those 3 out of 10. It's the one who come back from the 7 out of 10. Like you're gonna fail. So a couple of guys just mentally, even yesterday, were in the cages and I gave them 15 swings. And they start to get frustrated because they're not putting down 15 perfect hits. And I'm like, guys, if you hit 4, that's a good day. So just get 4. I've never seen even a professional player who gets 15 perfect hits in a cage. It's gonna happen. So once they start thinking that and they're like, all right, we had one kid and he came out and I asked him, all right, how many did you get? He said 6. I'm like, great, you just hit over 300. So it's just kind of, reminding them of those small successes and reminding them of the process and help like just kind of getting them back on that good mindset. And we've had to do that with at the Sox too. It's just reminding them of the little things that get to the big things because it's the little things that really make a difference.
Do you
I
have
mean,
any
that's why
resets? I mean, do you have any reset hacks to get them back on the right path in between the years?
So at Carroll, I introduced, breathing routine. They do yoga breathing at the end of the day. And while I don't recommend doing that while you're in the box because it takes a long time and it really slows you down, just encouraging them to have some kind of breathing exercise. So like for me, it was always I step out, I close my eyes, I take a breath, and then I get back in. Some guys, it's singing a song in their head, so they're not thinking too much, and or just humming a tune. Other guys, it could be a physical thing, adjusting their batting gloves or, tapping their bat. Just having something that kind of gives them a chance to calm down and relax. So it depends on the guy, but I try to at least give them some suggestions on things that they can do just to kind of reset. And sometimes it's me just actually telling them, hey, step back, reset, take a breath, and then they're good to go again.
What are you using for verbiage on flyball communication?
Shoot, what do we do? I don't remember which one's which because every team I think I've been on has been different. I think we just use ball, ball, ball for 3 times.
Yep. How are you handling the center fielder and the corner infielder that maybe will run into each other? If there's, hopefully it never happens, but I think this is something good for coaches. They don't normally think about this, and we had a couple that we used along the way, and I'm interested to see what people use if maybe we are going to run into each other.
Honestly, I don't think we really touched on that, particularly with the Sox, because I actually haven't seen us get to that point.
Hopefully they're good
And
enough and you never run
yeah,
in.
no,
We used the center fielder stayed high and the corners
yeah,
stayed low, and then in the out with the outfielders and the infielders we used the infielders stayed high and the outfielders went low, just so we weren't hitting heads. Hopefully, and we didn't really run into it much. I had one really bad one my second year at Western, and it was at Missouri State. Perfect hit ball into the right center field gap, and it just you couldn't. It was one of those perfect things that just happened, and they both laid out at the same time and banged heads, and poor Drew Glassy had to go to the hospital. That was a tough one for me because I'd never really had it at all, and we were leaving that day. So one of our assistants had to stay back with Drew until his family got there, and we had to go because we were heading back to school. So that was a tough one for me, and it was a rough one because they did bang heads. So we did try to spend some time on that. Just center fielders are going to stay up, corners are going to go down, and then same thing with the infielders are going to stay high, and the outfielders are going to go low. So just in case we were going to run into each other.
I think the only thing that I would be cautious about is just there are going to be situations where it's actually better for the corners to get the ball, and I don't want them going low if they're trying to catch it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more who's actually catching it. And I understand there are going to be situations where you don't hear them. So in that case, like if you don't have that confirmation, then yeah, I think you can go to your general rule, center fielder stays high. But if you know for sure, like your corner, if your corner is going to be able to catch that ball, and we've worked on this with communication too. There are going to be situations where your corner actually has a better throw than center if you get there at the same time. So in that case, center does need to back off. I would rather center go low and corner go high so they can actually stay up and make that throw. But those I think are going to be situations where you kind of have to just talk to the guys too.
And we would I know everybody maybe doesn't like using names. We allowed the middle infielder that as they were going out, we allowed them the freedom of calling someone's name just in case they were going to run into each other, just to give them a little bit of freedom. We were always trying to think about safety first.
Yeah.
Just not wanting that to happen. So we did allow the middle infielder the leeway to call somebody's name, just to make sure because sometimes they're calling ball, ball, ball at the same time. Those were just things we did work on where, hey, if we run into this at some point, then you could use first names if you needed to.
I've seen that too. I think with every organization I've been with, I've seen like 3 or 4 different ways to do it. Sorry.
That's all right. Hey, I was going to ask you, because you have 4 different coaches, how much do they stress to you all of using the same terminology when you're trying to describe swing mechanics?
We do try as much as possible. It becomes a little difficult because we don't always have time to get together. and actually talk about a specific player, especially if there's one coach seeing the same player consistently. It's not very often. And the few times the players will change coaches are like if guys get called up and we kind of spread them out a little bit more, or depending on what they're struggling with. So, like, I'm better with lower half than I am with hands. So, if we have a guy who's struggling with his lower half, they might come see me before they come see another coach. And in those situations, it's talking to kind of their primary hitting coach and letting them know what I've been telling them. And then kind of just listening in. I mean, the cages aren't that big. Like I could be on one side of the cage or one side and I could hear what the hitting coaches on the other side of the cage are telling their guys. So it is kind of just having that split mindset of hearing, okay, what are they telling them? So I could do the same thing. Or if a guy comes to see me and I'm not their primary coach, I'll usually go talk to the other hitting coaches and ask, okay, what have you been working on with him? So we try to stay on the same page. But generally, I think all of us are pretty good with it's not just your verbal cues, it's also showing them what they should be doing. So even if the verbal cue isn't necessarily the same, showing them what the motion should be like and trying to get them to feel it is important for all of us. And I think that really helps if guys just don't understand it verbally, especially, we get the Latin American guys. If we can't translate it in Spanish and our only fluent Spanish speaking hitting coach isn't available, we have to be able to show it and kind of play charades to figure it out.
Are you giving them other video feedback on that, or maybe an example of somebody who's doing it right?
Sometimes, if we can find a very specific, like if it's a very,
I know
specific,
the big thing now is everybody moves individually, and so we're going to hear it. But again, I'm a little old school with that. I just felt like it was good for them to see somebody doing it. I know everybody moves different. But I get it now because everybody does move different.
Like if it's a very specific motion and we could think of somebody who would be a good comparison, then yes. I'm never going to say no because for some guys, yeah, they just need to see that and that's fine. But like I've had players who, well, not at the Sox, thankfully, but I've had players here who they're like, hey, I want to swing like Yelich. And my first thing is, do you have a body like Yelich?
You're
like,
5'4". You're 5'4".
Yeah. Like you're not gonna swing like Yelich.
You are not the same. We ran into that a lot, and we tried to be very mindful of that, of making sure we picked guys that moved the same, looked the same frame wise, just to get a base off of that, rather than because again, you always did. Guys would just, I saw this guy do this. Well. It does work for them, but the likelihood of it working for you is probably not very high.
Like I said, if it's a very specific motion and we make sure they understand, like just pay attention to this one thing, maybe two things. And like I said, if we could think of a guy that's a good comparison, then of course we'll let them see it. I mean, whatever they need to actually understand what we're trying to explain to them, we're willing to do it. We just, of course, like as a coach, you don't want to mess up a guy because they're trying to do something that they physically can't do.
Yeah. Hey, how was fantasy camp?
That was awesome, and that was an adjustment. I mean, thankfully, I think I've established a good enough relationship with the campers. I've been calling it old man baseball because I think the very first day I was working base running during just kind of like the skills portion. And I realized, first of all, I got like 30 to 81-year-olds. They can't all sprint. So like, I have to like hold myself back because I'm so used to pushing. Like, no, you can run faster than that. Like, and it's only the first day. They're going to get sore.
How long of a day is that for them? When first day out, how long of the day is it for them?
I mean, we spend the entire 2.5 to 3 hours in the morning just doing field development where they're going around on the first day. We get lunch and then they play a 7-inning game in the afternoon.
They do play 7-inning game. That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was the other thing. Like nearly every day we have a coach pitch game and a camper pitch game. And both weeks I was always the coach who pitched. My very first day I pitched a shutout because there's also, as a coach, especially at the professional level, you're taught to throw BP not low, but below the belt. Like that's where you're aiming at. Guys don't swing at anything above the belt in BP, not necessarily. Well, at fantasy camp, they can't reach below the belt. So everything has to be high. And I am still figuring this out, but I have a habit of like, if my fastball is below the belt, 25-30% of the time, it's going to turn into a cutter. And guys are just whiffing or just weak contact because they're just not used to it. And it took me a while to finally figure out, okay, throw a little bit higher. This is the only way they're going to elevate it because they just can't bend. And but I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think it was a good ramp up for me since I had like 2 weeks off before that. I got my arm back in shape, which was awesome. I think I was throwing 2 to 3 times a day.
Are you doing any recovery stuff? You and I have text back and forth about this. Are
Yeah,
you doing any recovery stuff?
I haven't started yet. I
Good for you. It's good to be younger. Like when I got to be in the mid 40s, I had to do all the recovery stuff because my arm did not bounce back great towards the end. So I was doing a lot of recovery stuff, and it was fine when I got into that routine. But when I was younger, I did not do any of the recovery stuff either.
Yeah, I know I should. This is probably completely false, but I like to tell guys one of the reasons why I can also throw is because I don't throw as hard as everybody else. So I'm not putting as much force on my arm. And I tell guys when your arm is sore, you throw some more. You don't have to throw 100%, but just get your arm moving. Yep. But then I tell them, I said, throw more, not pitch more. Pitching is different than throwing. I don't pitch. I only throw.
And even flat ground's way different than off the mound.
Exactly. Like even if I'm throwing different pitches, I still say I'm not a pitcher. I'm an outfielder who learned how to throw different pitches. Yep. So I'm still throwing like with an outfielder's motion. That's why a lot of when I throw BP, I'm so over the top. It's not even funny. And actually, I didn't realize this until this year. Guys tell me my ball, like I hide my ball because I throw like an outfielder. So it gets on him a lot faster.
What are your other things that help you develop throwing BP? I think a lot of coaches have a hard time when they first get into it. What are some things that helped you when you first, especially with the outfielder? With the longer throwing motion at times, sometimes it's a little bit harder at a closer distance. So what are some of the things that helped you when you first got into throwing batting practice?
First one was literally just practicing, but like without a batter. So I started really practicing BP probably May or June of 2020. I mean, we were in the middle of COVID, I had nothing else to do, and I had access to a field. So I had a net, I had a tee. I'd put a tee behind home plate.
That's what I did too.
That was my catcher. And I started with, 3 days a week. I would throw about 50 pitches. And then every other week, I'd kind of add on and get up to like 60, get up to 70, start adding on days to the point where I could throw 6 days a week. And I was throwing 60 to 100 pitches, depending on how I felt. And now I try to now visualize a catcher. Yep. Like obviously it's a lot. I can warm up and I might be a little wild when I warm up, but as soon as I got a batter in there, I'm a lot more accurate because now I kind of have this, like I know where I need to go. And towards the end of the week, when my arm starts to get a little bit weaker, I start getting wilder. That's when I start putting a tee behind home plate. Yep. And now that's my catcher. And I'm just aiming for the tee essentially every single time.
I love the catcher visual now. You have them I love that they have the catcher back there for the BP guy. And that's,
we added that this past season.
It's a huge benefit because it gives you something to actually look at other than the batter. I think we all ran into that early on. You're going to look at the batter at times, so you may run one into them every once in a while. So to have another visual is a great thing for the BP thrower.
But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was really just practice. So even days where I don't throw BP, when I'm down in Florida, I throw 6 days a week. If I know I'm not going to throw BP, I'll throw about 100 pitches. But I'm also throwing different pitches. I don't just throw fastball. So I'm working on my breaking balls. I'm working on changeup. When I know I'm going to throw BP that day, I throw only about 60. But I at least basically like I get my warm up in early. And
I would take 60, by the way. I would take it.
Would take 60.
Hey, how much mixed BP are you all using? I mean, as opposed to feel good BP.
At the Sox, not BP, it's usually machine. If we do anything mixed pitch, we're going to get the machine out there. Just because I think I might be the only coach that can actually throw mixed pitch. So at least with the machine, it's a lot more accurate. So I completely understand that. And when I'm throwing to guys in the morning, there's a handful who I might like mix in a curveball just to see what they do. I'm not going to do that to all of them because at this point, like I know which ones will take it as a challenge and which ones will just get pissed off and frustrated. So there's also that. It's just knowing your players. At the college level, though, I throw mixed pitch BP at least once a week, whether it's a simulated at bat. And in those cases, like I have rules with those too. Like if they strike out looking, it's 20 push or yeah, strikeout looking is 20 push ups, strikeout swinging is 10, weak contact is 10 because I don't throw that hard. And then if I walk them, I do 10. So it's
Love
also
it.
a nice challenge for them.
Love it.
And they get really excited about that. Or yeah, I'll just ask, hey, do you want mixed pitch? So yeah, at the college level, I also have a little bit more control, so I can throw in a little bit more. But
It's a great way to check stride swinging too. I mean, you're going to run into it with your college guys that want to stride and swing at the same time. Just when you
mhm.
start to mix BP, they're going to see why they can't get away with that.
Yeah, and it might be a little bit slower than what they're used to, but it's also just getting them with like pitch recognition and seeing movement, seeing spin, and
You're
also
going to
just
see
getting them
slower
in a good
pitchers in a
mindset.
game also.
Yeah,
I mean, I would. This is almost like a Ken Ravizza thing. I'm like, do you need the BP pitcher to be that good because your swing's not good enough? Like, I mean, that's the question. Like, if your swing's not good enough, then you need the BP thrower to be really good. We would watch BP of big league guys. These guys aren't great throwers at times, but they're making the BP thrower look good. So I'm like, part of your
mhm.
job as a really good hitter is to make the BP thrower look good sometimes. Like, that's just part of being a good hitter.
Well, I also tell them like feel good BP is good. I can understand doing it right before a game, build up the confidence. But otherwise, when are you ever going to see a straight
Yep.
fastball down the middle every single time? Honest, when do you ever actually see it in a game when it's not a mistake? How many pitchers are truly throwing a fastball right down the middle? I mean, unless it's a 3-0 count. And even then, that's a risk.
Yep.
So, like, you're not going to see that in a game. Why would I continue to throw that to you during practice? Like, we're supposed to be getting you ready for the game, not ready for the home run derby. So, that's like they understand why I do it. And that's one of the reasons why, like, with machine, we'll put in, mixed pitch. Um, the guys don't always like it, but I mean, they understand why we do it. I feel like I would almost rather have a BP thrower just so they get also used to the arm action. But again, when you don't have a lot of coaches who throw multiple pitches, it gets a little bit harder. And I'll admit there it's more wear and tear on my arm when I'm throwing mixed pitch
For
versus
sure.
just straight fastball.
For sure.
There have been days where my elbow starts to feel it and I'm like, all right, too many curveballs today.
Hey, someone that's trying to get to the next level from a job interview standpoint, what are your tips for prepping for what they might see?
That's hard. Because I mean, from what I like the interviews that I've had, honestly, most of my interviews have been internships. So that's even harder. I think getting this job, one of the reasons why I was a little shocked was this was the first time I interviewed for or truly interviewed for a coaching position. And
How'd you prep
that,
for it?
so really it's just knowing what my own philosophy was. Kind of, they never asked for like specific drills. And I got the question, how would you approach a new hitter? And I just go through like, what do I do as a private instructor? What did I do in that situation where I do have a new hitter and I got 30 minutes? Or if I've got a freshman coming in, I try to have the same process every single time. It's physical assessment if I can, blast sensors, videos, getting as much information about them as I can before actually giving them instruction. And then just knowing your coaching philosophy, knowing
Was that the
being
first
able
time
to,
you wrote it down, or had you had it up to this point with your coaching philosophy?
I actually haven't really written it down.
Yeah.
It's more just, I mean, my
My
coaching,
memory's not good. I need to write. I have to write everything down because my memory's not good.
honestly, I should write it down because my coaching philosophy is really just, I coach based on what the player needs. Like it's nothing expansive. It's no real big deal, but it is just,
That is a big deal, though. I mean, it is. If your philosophy is what the player needs, because that's not everyone's philosophy. So, like, that is actually a big deal because that is your philosophy, what the player needs.
So, I mean, I could probably write it down, but I think because I live it so much, you just, for me, like, I just know it because that's the type of coach I want to be. Because, I mean, part of it is also, I try to explain it like being a coach, your job is to make your job obsolete. Guys should, after a while, guys should never need you. They should want you because they might need a sounding board, but they should never need you. You should always be in the background. They should never actually, I mean, that's one of the reasons why when guys ask for me to watch their swing when they're hitting off a machine, I have to explain to them when you're hitting off a machine, this is your live AB. I'm not going to be yelling at you from the dugout to fix your mechanics. This is why I don't say anything when I mean, until you're done with your round. And then you come talk to me. It's like you coming into the dugout, we'll talk briefly, but after that, I don't want you thinking about your mechanics because I should just be that sounding board where I need to get you to that point where you're just making the adjustment on your own. So to answer the actual question about, preparation, it is, yeah, just knowing your philosophy. If you need to write it down, then write it down. So that just becomes ingrained in you because this is how you should always approach coaching, but still being flexible enough. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, know what the industry is like, know what teams are looking for. And we touched on this earlier. You're not going to be in this industry long. You're not going to be in this job long if you don't have a growth mindset, if you're not open to actual conversation. I fully admit when I'm wrong, when I mess up, when I don't know something. And I know the guys appreciate that. I actually had a player just a couple weeks ago where, he asked me to do something and I haven't been able to, actually he was looking for I forgot what it was. I have it written down so I don't forget. Oh no, I know what it was. So like I said, my brother's a soccer player. So a couple of guys have been asking for his jersey. I haven't been able to find this one player's size yet. And I even let him know, hey, I'm still looking. He's like, no, I know your word is good.
Love it.
I mean, that's what it is. Like if I don't know something, they trust me that if I tell them I don't know, but I'm going to find out, I'm going to find out. So they don't care that you don't know. They just don't care that
they want to see you're making the effort. They just want to see that
you're lying.
You're making the effort.
So it's just being honest in your interview. I also say like teams aren't just interviewing you, you're interviewing the team.
Yes. And
I know that's hard for a new coach because like you want that job, you want to get in. And maybe for that first job, you might bend a little bit of things and you're not going to have as many like deal breakers. But after a while, you're going to get to the point where like, if this is not a team that has the same mentality as you, it's a lot harder to change a whole organization and the way they do things than it is for you to change the way you do things.
Do you have any go-to questions?
Yeah. What's something that you don't like working or like doing, or what's something that the team can change? Because sometimes it might not be a deal breaker. It might be something that you realize that you can actually help with. And then if that's the answer, now you've got a follow up and you can add on to that and go, oh, great. So either I've done that, or I think this is one way that you could help the team. So now you're already showing you're kind of giving things away already in your interview, but showing that you can provide value to the team. That's
what don't you like about your job? I always felt like was a good one. What don't you like about it? Because sometimes what they don't like was not a negative to me because everybody is different. So I think you get a lot of good information out of what don't you like about your job because maybe some of the things they feel like are a negative, you maybe wouldn't feel like were a negative.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think it's important because it also kind of shows like the honesty. Because again, like you want to join an organization that you're going to be comfortable in and has a similar philosophy, or at least they're open to listening to you. And I think that's important. So yeah, just knowing your coaching philosophy, researching the organization as much as you can. If I know I'm going to be interviewing with a certain person, it's just like with any job. Like I look up that person, look up, either where they went to school, what their background is, things that I can ask specifically. So it's not just general questions that you ask every team. But I've also found like by the time you get to the point where you're interviewing face to face, a lot of it is them just trying to get to know you as a person too. I don't actually get a lot of skills questions. Besides the, how do you approach a new hitter, or, you're actually coaching philosophy. A lot of it is really just getting to know me as a person. And I try to still talk about coaching at the same time. So I'm also, you're just, be passionate. Like if this is something you really want to do, show it. I'm not talking about like being a fan. Trust me, team, that's another thing. Like at the professional level too, like teams don't care who you were a fan of. I was hired by the Red Sox and I grew up a Yankees fan. They don't care. As long as you're not like constantly talking about your favorite team or
Well, I
your
knew
child.
you were passionate because COVID, I think that was the best thing about COVID was all the Zoom chats we had. Every Zoom chat I was on, you were on there and in there trying to learn and get better. So, and you and I hadn't met face to face yet. And I was like, I don't know her, but I know she's willing to work at it. And so that was the thing that stuck out to me is like you were in trying to get better in COVID and getting after it. So I appreciated the fact that you were on everything with us because not everybody does that. I mean, it's the best time to be a coach because there's a lot of avenues, but you have to make that next step and put the. So I knew you were passionate about it because you were on everything with me. It was awesome.
I appreciate that. I guess like that would be the other thing too is yeah, just learn as much as you can and try to show that in your interview. Like explain not only what you've done, but what you want to continue doing. Like I've got a list of, research projects, things that I still want to work on. I mean, if I'd had more time here at Carroll, not as many not as many resources, but they had the blast sensors, they have Rapsodo. I wanted to do live blast with the Rapsodo, match up the pitches. So now I can actually see what their blast numbers look like based on what type of pitch they're seeing.
Yep.
And then I can also see, all right, where are their numbers dropping and where are they struggling with specific pitch? So it's not just, seeing live and we have no idea what the actual pitch is, but all we see are like inconsistent numbers. They could be consistent based on the pitch they're seeing. So they're fast, like them seeing a fastball might be really consistent. Them seeing a slider is consistent. It's just lower than or worse numbers than the fastball. So like those are the kind of things that like bring those things into the interview because
Ask
I
good
might not be able to do
questions.
that. Yeah, like just
Good questions lead to answers, and maybe
mhm.
it's okay. This isn't what we're gonna do, but the better questions out there lead to better answers, even if it's okay. We need to pivot and do something else.
Yeah, and like just ask questions. This is why I encourage our players to do it. Pitching's probably a little different, but at least I tell our guys hitting it is a science. Like experiment, and they're so scared to mess up off the tee because they think it's going to mess up their swing. And I'm like, trust me, it's not. It's going to take you 2 or 3 months of consistently doing the same action before it becomes natural for you. You're going to resort back to your old swing. So trying it off a tee for one day is not going to mess up your current swing, but it might make it better. So let's at least try it.
Yeah, if you're
And
uncomfortable, you're on the right path. It
yeah,
means you're starting to change some things once it becomes a little bit uncomfortable because your more comfortable path is going to feel great. And so if you are trying to make some adjustments, there's going to be some uncomfort with that.
but eventually, if it's the right path, it'll become comfortable.
Yes.
But it's, just trying to get guys to understand that. And part of that is, the relationship building, getting them to trust you. Like I've got guys who at this point, I don't always encourage this because I want them to question me, but I got guys who trust me so much, they won't say a thing. They'll just go, all right, let's try it. Like they just trust that I know what I'm talking about. But I mean, I'll still explain it. I'll never just say, hey, we're just going to do this. Like I'll at least tell them why so they understand it too. But yeah, I think that's like the best advice I can say, at least preparing for an interview is just know your stuff and be confident about it. Like they wouldn't interview you if they didn't think like just trust me, especially at the professional level. They get so many resumes, so many applications. They weed those out by the time they get to the point where they're face to face. If you get to a face to face interview, they think you know what you're talking about. Now they just want to see if you're a good fit. So just relax and be honest. That's what teams are looking for.
Hey, what'd you get out of getting your law degree and your MBA?
Well, originally when I was getting them, I thought I was going to be a GM.
Yeah.
So I will say that. But I do say, I'll start with the MBA. Creative thinking is really important. I mean, when you're in a business, you're trying to get ahead of the competitor. You can't do the exact same thing they do. And baseball is such a reactive game. One team does something and they succeed, everybody else follows. But guess who's still ahead? the team who did it first. So you got to find a way to get ahead of the competitors, get ahead and do something different. And it's the same thing as being a coach. You can't just give the guys the same drills over and over again that everybody else has done. Sometimes you have to think outside the box and do something differently. And it's a risk, but sometimes it pays off. And then being a lawyer, I say, is just like being a coach. You have to build up that relationship. You have to know your client slash player very well, get that buy-in, get that trust. You have to know your information so well that you could break it down and explain it to somebody who doesn't know the information, also based on what they actually need. And then, a lot of the times, more than 50% of the time, your answer is going to be, it depends. So I think it actually has helped. And I get students all the time who ask, like, what's the best degree to get if you're trying to get into sports or get into coaching? And honestly, I say there's no best degree. I mean, yeah, kinesiology certainly helps with, body mechanics, but I did a biomechanics certificate on the side. So there's still ways to learn this stuff. I mean, internet's amazing. There's a lot of free stuff out there where you can learn this information. You don't need a degree in it as long as you can apply it to your actual job and explain to potential employers how you do it. No matter what degree you get, the most important thing is just learning how to learn. Because especially as a coach, like that's the growth mindset. It's just like, I can go in and say, I don't know what the law is. That's not what law school teaches you. It doesn't teach you the actual law. It teaches you how to read it, understand it, and break it down. So now I can do that with majority of things I read, whether I know it or not. I can understand it, I can learn it, I can break it down, and I can teach it to somebody else. And that is exactly what coaching is.
Do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have something you thought was going to sidetrack you, but looking back now is one of the best things that happened to you?
Grad school. No. At the time, obviously, I thought it was a good path. Again, because I thought I wanted to be a general manager. I will say now it actually still is it's a good backup. Hopefully I'm never in the position where I don't have a coaching position, but it's nice to know that something happens, I can transition back into the front office, especially with the experience I have. But
you talk about soccer. Honestly, that was one of mine too. I got cut my junior year of high school. I got cut from varsity, and honestly, it was the best thing that happened to me because it allowed me to start training for baseball earlier, and I would have never done that if I would have kept going. And I needed help in the weight room a lot at that point. So it stuck. It stung. Like, that was the first time ever in my life that somebody had told me I was not good enough. So it actually, looking back now, it was one of the best things that happened to me.
Well, for me, it was actually freshman year of college. I'm not ashamed to say this now, but I was academically suspended. I finished my first semester with a 1.11 GPA. And I like to think of this as encouraging to people now because, you get students who freak out when they get a 2.7. And like, dude, if I finish, and I get it at Dartmouth, so, a little bit different standards, but if I could finish with the 1.11, graduate, and I bumped up my GPA by a lot. Still not great. My graduate school GPAs were actually better than my undergrad. But the fact that hey, it's you get it done. You get through mental toughness, persistency.
How did you get off the mat after that, though? I mean, that's a gut punch. 1.1. How did you get off the mat?
Well, one, my parents were a big help. This was that moment, like freshman coming in and realizing you're not the best. It is honestly the first time, and I don't even consider getting cut from the soccer team the first time I failed, because that one was on me. I just hate running. You can't play soccer when you hate running.
No, you can't. That's
so
not allowed.
I didn't get cut because of lack of skill. It was just, I do not like to run. But this was also like my identity growing up was not an athlete. It was academics. I got 4 younger siblings, and I'm the least athletic of all of them. So I always knew academics was going to be, that's why I never looked into playing sports in college initially. So when I started failing academically, when I never even had to study in high school, that's when I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm doing now. Like I lost my identity. I didn't know what I was going to be majoring in anymore. I nearly dropped out. When I got that letter, I called my parents crying, and I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to Dartmouth anymore. And they're the ones who said, no, you got to push through it. You got to try. Like,
what did you adjust school wise? I mean, the workload is obviously way different, and I always try to relay that to our players. Like what you did, what you just said, like what you did in high school up to this point is not going to work at this level. So, what did you do adjusting for that next semester to get better grades?
Well, one, my time management got better. I think growing up, and we kind of touched on this too. Uh, you're so used to somebody always telling you where you're supposed to go at what time when you're supposed to do something. I had to now create my own schedule. And I also discovered like I did better academically the busier I got because I couldn't procrastinate. And that was my big issue too, is I got my freshman year, all I did was cheerleading and worked for the radio station. And the radio station wasn't even much. It was a 30, I wrote down like a couple sentences, something 30 seconds, recorded it, and then I was done. So it really was the cheer team. When I'd grown up doing 10 different clubs and activities, I didn't have time to procrastinate. I just did my homework. But I mean, it was also like learning how to study was a big thing for me. I never studied in high school, um, which is crazy because now I think like how much better I could have done. I actually did really well in high school. So I wonder how much better I could have done if I'd actually studied. But
What did you add in studying wise that you weren't
so
doing?
that one took me a while. My version of studying in high school was literally reading the material once and then I was good. And that was not good enough. Now I actually, because and unfortunately, I didn't get quite to the point that I wanted to be as a student. Even when I got to grad school, I was too much of a crammer. And it wasn't even really the procrastination. Like I knew I had maybe 2 weeks and I would still cram. I never truly retained the information I learned. I would learn it just enough for the exam and then I wouldn't retain it
That's
after.
a hard
I
part of the
don't,
way school's set up now. For it's just with grades and all that. It's just part of our culture academically in the states. Is it's kind of how it's set up, where you're going to study for the test rather than study to know the information and learn it. I don't know if that culture is going to change. I wish it did, but my
it's
wife is
hard.
a grade school teacher. She has a lot of ideas of how to change that.
I mean, I feel like that's what high school taught me, especially once you start taking like AP classes. You were taught how to take the AP exam.
Yes.
You were not taught how to actually learn it. And at my school, if you took the AP exam, you didn't have to take the final. So all we did was learn how to prepare for the AP exam. So I also kind of had to just learn about myself as a student and what my motivation was. And my motivation was I had to actually be interested in the material. And this is going to be a lot of students. I did not do well in the classes where I did not like the material, but I learned it well enough that I could pass. But obviously I majored in sociology. I went through every single class offered at Dartmouth, wrote down the classes I thought I was interested in, and found out the majority of them were in sociology. And that's how I picked my major. It had nothing to do with what I was actually planning on doing in the future. I just wanted to pass. I just wanted to graduate. So I picked what I thought would actually help me because I knew it had to be something I was actually interested in. And those are the things I retain. Like I am terrible at statistics. Sabermetrics, though, I'm good at. And I
There's a
don't know
story to
why.
those. That's the
Yeah, like
difference between stats and
baseball.
saber. There's an
Yeah,
actual story behind those stats.
I'm gonna have to look back because like I tell people anything baseball related, I can retain. I'm good, except for baseball trivia. Don't ask me history. Don't ask me trivia. Once the season's done, I don't care anymore. Like people will ask me, like, people will try to test me, and they're like, "Oh, how did so and so do, in this certain year?" I'm like, I don't know, and I don't care because the
It's
year's
not your
done.
job to know that. It's your job to know
No,
what's going on now and how to help in the future.
exactly. So, like, yeah, baseball stuff, that's fine because like I actually care about it. But I think like I took a geology class as my lab at Dartmouth, and the only thing I remember is what a meandering river is, and that's only because I thought it was interesting. I was like, that's like I'm that type of student, but knowing that is what helped me. So I took my required classes, and then everything else, I probably could have almost double majored in sociology because that's all I took because that's what I was interested in. And that's what bumped my grade up because my major GPA was like a 3.2 or 3.3 because that's what actually kept my interest. So
I
It
was
was
lucky because I really did like psychology, but then I was able to take some philosophy and religion classes also. So I had a really diverse undergrad degree, which was great. I'm glad it was that diverse. But then I was able to get more specific with my master's. So I felt like my education in college was great because I had a really broad based undergrad, but then I was able to focus a little bit more on what I wanted to do with my master's. It's not
well, I
for
did two
everybody, but it
things.
worked for me.
I actually did do, I took classics, anthropology, religion, African American studies. It was still all like the soft sciences. Um, and I wish I'd had time to do psychology. But I mean, even English, like I took a Shakespeare class, which seems kind of out of nowhere, but I actually own a giant volume of like all of Shakespeare's plays and collections. And this is something as a kid, this is the weird childhood I had growing up where my parents actually got me Shakespeare books as a kid. So that's what I grew up reading.
My
And like,
wife reads all the reissues. You know, they redo Shakespeare's plays. A modern author redoes there and reimagines them. So my wife reads all the reimagined Shakespeare plays. All right,
yeah,
we're
that's
at. Hey, what about morning or evening routines that you like that keep your energy good?
little difficult depending on one like off season. I my biggest morning routine when I'm not a morning person at all. So it's got to be something that actually makes me want to wake up. And I hate working out. So I've had to find different ways to work out that's actually interesting to me. Again, knowing myself as a person. So like I hate cardio and I actually have a really bad knee. So I can't run, I can't do bikes. So I actually do kickboxing in the morning. And it's like I even have the gloves, I have the wraps. My last apartment, we actually had a bag in the gym. So that would actually get me up. And this is something I'd wanted to do since I was a kid. I asked my dad for a bag and he said, no, just go ahead and punch a pillow. Karate was one of the things I did for a little while. So that has always interested me. When I was in high school, I did turbo kickboxing as my cardio. I do love strength training. So I will get up to lift. So I try to do that in the morning because it also wakes me up. Um,
How do you get yourself going? I mean, your guys' schedule there, you're going to have some early mornings. So how do you get if you know? And we talked about that. Dr. Chris Winter was on with me, the sleep episode, and we talked about chronotypes because some people are predisposed to being night
uh,
owls, and so I'm always intrigued by someone who, because I used to be a night owl. I'm much better at getting up now, but I was when back in the day I was more of a night owl. So how do you get yourself going when you need to, when you're going to have some early morning practices and those things?
well, that's one, the workout. When I said it wakes me up. When I say I'm not a morning person, I actually have scientific proof.
Yes.
So I did the same thing. I did a sleep journal
Yep.
one summer where I knew I had nothing to do. So I had no schedule. I just went to sleep when my body told me to, and I woke up without an alarm. And I found my natural sleep schedule is to go to bed at around 3 or 4 in the morning and
Yep.
wake up at 10.
Yep.
That's when I felt most refreshed. I didn't even need 8 hours. I just needed to basically sleep in until 10 or 11.
Yep.
Like I could go to bed at 6 and I will still wake up at around 10 or 11 feeling refreshed. So
So you're going to be good
expect
for
that.
night games.
Oh,
You
you
need
know,
to get a night
that's
game
one of the reasons why I
schedule.
also wanted to be a coach. Because I'm like,
Seriously,
once I get to that
you're going to
level,
be perfect for a pro ball
I
schedule
am
because
such a night
you will
out.
be perfect for a pro ball
Yeah.
schedule.
All my best projects and papers were done at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mine too.
I
I
love
would start
praying
studying
on the
usually
clock.
around 11 o'clock at night. That's why I was a terrible practice player. I admit it. I was a terrible practice player because I started to wind down at that point. So God bless the coaches that had to deal with me because I was awful in practice. But I was good for night games. So
Well, we at least here at Carroll, we practice at 9 at night. So if
ah,
I'm
that's awesome.
practicing, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. I'm good. So yeah, with our schedule in Florida, it took some getting used to because I almost have to force myself to try to go to bed at 8 or 9, and it's really hard because
So hard.
I struggle to sleep before 11:30, and part of that and one of the reasons why like being a coach is so helpful for me is I have to be mentally exhausted to sleep. It doesn't matter how I feel physically. I could be as long as I'm laying in bed, I'm resting. Mentally though, if I have not stimulated myself throughout the day, I will stay up. And I have unintentional all nighters every couple of months. And part of this is because my natural sleep schedule, but also if I don't do enough during the day to basically shut my brain down, I will be up until 4 or 5 in the morning and I'll be yawning too. Like I'm physically tired, but I can't shut my brain down.
I would have to
So
keep a notepad next to my bed just to brain dump if I needed to. If the wheels really started spinning and I was ruminating and trying to get it turned off, I would keep a pad next to my bed so I could just brain dump it, and that helped sometimes.
So if I ever get to that point, that does help. I have like my notes section, like I said, with all my research ideas. But I also have this one YouTube video, and I've told this to guys too. Like I will turn off all the lights. I'll turn down the screen on my computer, turn it around, but I will play this video, and it's instrumental music.
Love it.
But I don't do instrumental music where I know the songs because then I start singing in my head. So I actually do Japanese music from movies that I know. So I know the song, I just can't sing it because it's in Japanese and I haven't learned it yet. I mean, I'm working on Japanese, so I do know basic, but
Love
not
it.
enough to sing the songs. So I'm usually out by the third song. Like I think only once have I ever listened to the entire video, and it's about 2 hours long, and that's because it was the middle of the day and I was just curious. Um, so yeah, I've found ways to kind of force myself to get to sleep. Waking up again, I actually have to set my alarm every 15 minutes for about 2 hours. So if I have to be up at 6, my alarm starts going off at 4 every 15 minutes, and it has to be on the other side of the room because as a kid, I would do that too. I'd put my alarm on the other side of the room, but I would sleepwalk to it, turn it off in my sleep, and go back to bed. So that's another reason why I have to do it every 15 minutes because eventually I will finally be fully awake. But mentally, I'm probably never awake until 10. I just kind of
And
force
Dr.
myself
Winter was
through
the
it.
same. He said the same thing. He goes, I am a night owl, and he goes, it was the exact same hours as you. And that's the neat thing with science is we know all this stuff now, and
Yeah. You
it's
just find ways to get past it. Like I don't drink caffeine. I will say that I got through college and grad school without drinking coffee. The only time I do caffeine is when I have a migraine because caffeine's in it. And I still try to avoid that because the caffeine usually takes a while to kick in. And then by then it kicks in at night and I can't sleep. Like I couldn't even drink Mountain Dew as a kid because I would get wired. Like sugar keeps me awake.
I didn't need it
I need
either.
to find a
I
way to
need a
wake
little
me
more
up.
now, but back then, no.
I know I can't do it. You can ask any of the coaches that I worked with this past season. I will go into our staff meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning with a handful of hot tamales, Pop Tart, like some kind of sugar to wake me up. And that is what I'm eating throughout the day until about game time around noon. That's when I'm like, all right, now I'm ready to go. But until then, I'm constantly just putting sugar in my body to keep myself awake.
Hey, we got a chance to hang out in Chicago. What did you like about the convention this year?
Uh, One, I did it differently. I will say I approached the convention differently than the last one. So my first one was Nashville in 2020, and I went down with the Carroll coaches and stuck to them like glue. Essentially, it was either them or the University of Dallas coaches that I knew. And this time, I went by myself. We had some Red Sox coaches who were there. We met up a couple of times, but for the most part, I forced myself to actually branch out. And I didn't go to every single clinic like I tried to do the first time. I looked ahead, picked the ones that I knew I wanted to go to, and then otherwise I reached out to as many people as I could. Just said, "Hey, I want to meet up at some point." Um, so it was more the networking aspect, since you could watch the videos later. So the networking aspect was really important for me, and then the talks after, doing the Q&As, doing the hot stoves, and then even just meeting up with people. Like meeting up with you at 11 o'clock at night. I tell people in those 3 days, I got 8 hours of sleep total because we'd be up till
Mine as
4 or 5
well.
talking baseball. And then first clinic is at 8:30. And, again, I don't drink caffeine. So I got to get like breakfast beforehand. I've discovered, I hate to say it, but Excedrin is really helpful.
That's all
the
right.
Yeah, the painkiller kicks in, the caffeine kicks in later in the day. I'm good to go for the rest of the day. So figured out a way to do that. But I think for me personally, it was just different mindset, not thinking I had to do everything, figuring out what was the most important for me and which clinics I really wanted to go to, meeting up with people. And I think honestly, also just the idea, it's kind of like that first season back for minor leaguers after, their season was canceled for COVID. having done it virtually last year and getting to do it in person this year, it was just even more special. Um, but I think I did find like a good routine that I had every day and just not having so many expectations on myself, but also just being willing to branch out and meet different people and not just be in the same spot every single time.
That's a
Not
way to
being
grow. I mean,
yeah,
you get out of you get out of your comfort zone. You're around people you don't know. Your communication skills are much better, and you're always going to pick up something being around somebody you don't know. And again, terminology or any of that stuff, you're going to pick up
yeah,
a lot of cool things, and it's just a way to grow as a human because you're around new people. It's awesome.
yeah. I think I was by myself for at least 50% of the convention,
Yeah,
whether it's going into a clinic by myself, going into the trade show, just walking around.
I was a
Obviously,
lone ranger also. I was too.
you were all over the place.
Well, now it's different than when I was coaching, but when I was coaching, I wanted the freedom to be able to venture off and
Mhm.
go to different areas. And I knew maybe who I wanted to go see was going to be different than the guys that I was with or girls that I was with. And so I just think you need that freedom to be able to go where you want to, because I always felt bad that I'd have somebody with me and maybe they want to go do something else, which is fine. Just give everybody the options to go do their own thing.
Yeah. But I definitely also came in with a different focus. And part of that was, working with our new base running coordinator, trying to come up with an organizational plan. When I told him I was at the convention, he said, great, go to all the base running clinics.
Yep.
So I knew I was doing base running. I knew I wanted to try to hit the hitting ones. I had a rule that I was going to go to at least one pitching one. I tried to go to the catching, but I think I got caught up talking with people instead. But I mean, that's like, so I had a plan going into it. Wasn't just try to attend as much as I could.
As a position coach, I really liked going to the pitching ones because I felt like I picked up some new throwing program stuff that I could mix in to the position players' throwing program with what the pitchers were doing.
Well, as a hitting coach for me, one, I started on the pitching side before I became a hitting coach. The Reds converted me. So I can actually scout pitchers better than I can hitters. But as a hitting coach, it's really helpful because I can pick up tendencies. So I think it's the same thing. Like if you're a pitching coach, you're going to learn as much about hitting as possible so you can attack that. As a hitting coach, why wouldn't we know about pitching so we know what to expect? I mean, hitting isn't just swinging, it's actually competing with the pitcher. It's
Approach,
hard to
knowing
compete
how
with
they're
the
getting you
pitcher if
out.
you don't know
Yeah.
what's coming. So, I mean, picking up tendencies, picking up just those little things. I mean, even with mechanics, if you could pick up something mechanically, you could try to take advantage of that, especially because pitchers, they're the ones in control to start with. They've got the ball first. We're just reacting to them. So we need to pick up as much as we can about pitching. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I try to go to the pitching sessions, even if it's a mechanic one or if it's just, pitch selection. I mean, things like that, just trying to pick up on those little things that now I can introduce to our hitters. Because for me, I think that's almost more important sometimes, especially as you get higher up.
Yep.
Like I said, it's less the mechanical, it's more the timing and the approach. And a lot of that is just going to be knowing about the pitcher.
All right, what's some final thoughts?
About what? That's a
Anything?
broadcast.
Did we miss anything? Or there something I didn't ask that maybe I should have?
Uh no, I think we were really thorough. Honestly, final thoughts are, and I will say this because I've been seeing it on Twitter. Super Bowl just ended, and everybody's saying now it's baseball season. People saying, well, it's not baseball season because of the lockout. One, baseball season already started. College baseball's been playing already.
Yep.
We got teams who already have games. So stop discounting anything that's not D1 baseball.
I agree. I do the same,
What's
and I
that
coached
one?
D1 22 years, but that's why we do a preview before the Division One preview, so people know that there's games going on. I'm
Yeah.
trying to push that narrative as well. We
I mean,
have more
fine,
games going on.
I will give NFL their season, but baseball season already started. And yes, minor leagues are playing.
Yes, for sure. That's what people
Like,
are like.
so many
Well, I
people are
usually
like,
go
oh,
to
there's no
Arizona and
baseball.
Florida. I'm like, go watch the minor leaguers play. Go watch
Yeah.
the minor leaguers play. They'll appreciate the fact that there's people there to watch them play.
And last year, without the major leaguers there, we got to use the stadium.
Yep.
And for anybody, like if you're in Florida, especially during the summer, we do have a rookie ball team. The number of fans who don't know that rookie teams exist, I mean, I guess it's understandable, but at the same time, like this is your chance to see
See
these guys.
future big leaguers.
Yeah, and oh man, the number of times I'll see a tweet about a guy who they're like gets called up to low A and they get all excited. Oh, I get to see his minor league debut. I'm like, he already debuted.
Yes.
It's called rookie ball. He already played. Like,
And
don't take that away from them.
and the neat thing for you too is there's not a ton of adjustments, but there are going to be adjustments for your 18-year-old rookie that allow them to get to the big leagues. They're going to make some adjustments along the way, so it's cool to kind of see them at that age. Well, you can go back to Mike Trout's perfect games video. It's not the same as what it looks like right now. Christian
Yeah,
Yelich, it's not the
always
same.
something to work on.
Those guys made adjustments. They were really good back then, but you can go pick those swings out and see they're not the Yelich's swing wasn't that great when he was 18 years old. It's really good now, so even those guys have made adjustments to get there.
Well, I'll say also mentally, like one, they're more accessible. Not that like you can get on the field, but
Yeah.
you want to get an autograph, it's a lot easier doing it at the rookie level than when they get called up. But also just our guys react when there are fans in the seats.
Yes.
It is more of a game for them when they have people watching, and it does make a difference. So like I try to pretty much like my Twitter and Instagram accounts, basically the team account during the season.
Love it.
Like that's mostly what I tweet about is just, how we did, different guys. I mean, I'm gonna try to do more this season. We'll see. Obviously our schedules are crazy, and I'm not trying to tweet in the middle of the day because we're working. But I think that's the only thing. It's just trying to make people realize there's as much as obviously my long term goal is to be a major league manager. There is more than just Major League Baseball.
Yes, there is.
Like, there's
That's
a
why the
lot
game's
more
great.
out there.
A
Yeah.
lot of avenues. All right, Bianca, thank you very much. I'm excited to follow you here during spring training, and then if you need something, reach out to me. So I appreciate you coming on with me.
Oh, thanks again for having me on.